Hello, I'm Pastor Lauren Richmond of East Denver Bible Baptist Church, welcoming you again to YouTube. We want to just share a little bit, and I thought in these times I'd just go back and share some stories from the past and maybe some things that God has done for us. Sometimes we forget what God has done in the past, and we need to realize what He's done in the past He can do for us again. I'm reminded of going to Woodbridge, Virginia, in 1980. My wife and I accepted an opportunity to be a youth pastor and teach in a Christian school and coach in a church in Woodbridge, Virginia. When we accepted the opportunity, we did not know that the church was in bankruptcy. And so a lot of things that were promised to us after we got there, we found out we weren't going to receive them. And there was something else that had happened back in 1978 where I had just moved and taken a position as a youth pastor and working in a Christian school in College Point, Queens. And that Saturday, as I was out on my bus route for visitation for Sunday morning, I had been in an accident, and it was very upsetting. There had been a light that had been blocked by tree branches and another light that was out and went into the intersection, had this accident. So very upset, not understanding what God was doing right then, but I'm always reminded there's a scripture that says we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. I didn't know exactly what God was doing, but I just had to trust that he was working. And so things 3.5 years went by. We moved down into New York. Went from New York City to Virginia, working in this Christian school. The promises had been made to us, but the church wasn't fulfilling the promises because there was no money there to do it. Did announce that the teachers would get paid in the school, but the pastor and myself would not be getting paid. Well, unfortunately, what had happened was the pastor's wife, she was getting paid as a teacher, and my wife was a teacher in a Christian school, but she was the only teacher that did not get paid, so it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. We didn't complain about it, although I did say something to the pastor about it, but after that happened, we dealt with a lot of Marines from Quantico there in our church. And so one of those Marine families had gone to the commissary to buy food, and God had directed them to buy food for us, even though we'd never told them that our cupboards were empty or what was going on. And he went in and bought food, brought it to us, and came over to our house and saw our empty cupboards. But the interesting thing was that the things that he bought for us were the exact type of things that we would have bought for ourselves, even to the brand name. It's just amazing how God works. And so we were very thankful for that. Well, as God begins to deal with my heart about going back to New York City and either becoming a pastor there or starting a church, I really felt the burden. I remember getting down on my knees on November on a Sunday afternoon, and I had heard a message by Bud Bierman who'd preached that God can give you the ability to do that which you don't think you could do. And so the pastor in the church in New York City had always said that, well, Lauren, you're good enough to be a youth pastor, but you're not good enough to be a pastor. You'll just always be a second man. Well, God showed me, according to 2 Corinthians 12:9, that his grace was sufficient. His strength was made perfect in my weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So I became burdened about going back to New York, and I prayed that God might open that door, and he chose to do that. I said, Lord, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to allow me to go back and visit the city before Christmas so I can see what you have for me. And it was just seemed like no opportunity. Well, the very next afternoon, on a Monday, the pastor's wife came to me, said there's a call in the office from a Mr. Levine from New York City. Turned out he was a lawyer and for Allstate, and he said the court case that you were involved in the accident in 1978 is coming up in court in the morning. We need you back in New York City tonight at 6:30. I was able to hop on a plane, which the insurance company paid for, got back there. The case was settled out of court the next day for $10,000, which Allstate covered. And then after that happened, I knew exactly why God had brought me back. And I shared with the pastor. I called him and said, you know what? I'm going to take a few days here, and then I'm giving a 2 weeks notice when I get back. We'll be heading to New York City. And the pastor said to me, well, you can't do that. You signed a contract. And I pointed out to him, you know what? We signed a contract, but we didn't get paid. So that doesn't make the contract viable. So God opened up the door. We read in 1 Kings 17 how God had taken care of Elijah, and we trusted that God would take care of us. And I could share so much more about that today, but I want to say this testimony today that God does and did exactly what he said he would do. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.